Paul, how's it? Here we go.
Hey, good to see you again.
Good to see you again too. No, third time on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I wanted to get hold of you because I just followed up on that debate with Peter Todd.
Yeah, with Peter. Yeah. What did you think?
I thought it was shambles. Okay. We can start off with the lowest hanging fruit. Peter was he was rude. He was rather obnoxious. The content of his words were the content of his speech was just he kept dodging you, and I don't know how you accepted paying that money to him.
Yeah, the way I see it is, I'm very interested in if there actually objectively is anything wrong with drive chain. So I think, okay, this is the best that the universe has got. This is the best microscope that the universe has, and it's not a very good one.
Yep.
But I thought I will leave no stone unturned. But yeah, I was really surprised at he was really very he put almost no effort into looking into the idea. And it's obvious that he has never really visited drivechain.info, the site. As he said in Baltic Honey Badger, that there is no code. But even though we have software that has a GUI, we've had that for like years. So
yeah.
So I don't know. I think he just has this idea in his head of what it is, and he's unwilling to. Some people just don't take anything in. They have no inputs, and they just think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, but I thought that maybe we'd get something out of that. I was surprised he didn't even say any of these. Sometimes people come up with. I think it's all concern trolling, and it's all fake, and it's all just people shilling their. They have some kind of alternative investment. So many of these people are actually altcoiners, or they just have some big LN lightning narrative, or they have some kind of Peter does RGB and whatever. So,
Paul, are you familiar with the CIA handbook on how to sabotage organizations?
Yeah, that came to mind about the just constantly referring things to committees and how nothing gets done in Bitcoin anymore, and we don't really have a process, which is another way of saying we have a process, but it's extremely defective, and you don't know who to address your grievance to, who you complain to. So it's just Kafkaesque. I think that is it's definitely we seem to be following the CIA playbook. Even I don't know if anyone is trying to make that happen on purpose, but
maybe you pay enough money to Peter Todd and it'll make it happen.
I suppose. I just don't it's definitely possible. I don't think so, but I just think he's actually. It's very easy to explain it with just sort of selfishness and ego, because of course think about what it would mean. He has been against this idea for so many years. He would have to really admit that he was wrong in a big way, and his point of view is very back in 2014. He had a point of view that it was very close to the truth, but was wrong. The true part is that Bitcoin Core should care about the cost of running a L1 full node.
Oh, this is the con-op. This is the con-op factor. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So we should care about that, but what you should do is you should factor that out and not care about anything else. Everything else is a distraction, and especially you should not care about miners' costs, because that is just the same thing. That's saying that we should get rid of proof of work in Bitcoin, basically.
No, it sounds like he's getting rather communist about this thing, as if he's got this wand that taps over everybody's business, and he says, okay, this is how we're going to organize things, I don't fully understand because if I decide to sink as much of the process down into an ASIC, for whatever it might be, or lay fiber optic cables between my neighbors and whatnot, that's my expense. Do you see what I mean?
What we want for hour miners, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
and he has this view that he's very interested in how much it's costs to start up a new mining operation,
Why
or
should he
like
care? Is he
uh,
paying for them? Is he paying for it?
I don't. I think that if we could steel man it, we would say something like we all share the same miners, but at the same time, it doesn't really make sense because proof of work is actually saying that we are very um we have a lot of conditional love for the miners. You know, we fire the bottom half of performers every 2 weeks. The bottom half of the designs are cut. So yeah, I mean, like mining must operate at the most profitable configurations. So if those are at different scales, then too bad for the scales that are not profitable. I mean, he has a view that is something like at each, if you have costs, they must co-vary perfectly with the number of hashes each like person perform. It doesn't really make any sense, but we could try to figure it out anyway.
I'd
I
actually
think it's all
quite
just
like
kind
to
of
do that.
laziness.
It seems like you both
Lazy.
had differing opinions on.
It's a combination of laziness and concern trolling, I think. But it's like he thinks if you do 1 trillion hashes versus like 1,000 hashes, the costs have to scale like perfectly. And so I'm not exactly sure what he thinks would happen if two people like merged their operation, or if they were in a different room and then you removed like a cardboard divider between the rooms, if it would like but I guess what he's saying is it has to be equally like at each, so even down to like if you're doing like 12 hashes a day, that should be exactly, you know, 1 millionth the economic profile of someone that's doing 12 million hashes a day. And I don't know, like it doesn't make any sense,
But yeah,
but
okay. No, I mean we have to try to understand. But even from another
yeah,
perspective, like I can still run a Bitcoin miner node literally without any sidechain software, none of it, nothing,
you're right.
nada. And where is the
Well,
added
yeah,
cost coming from? Sorry.
you noticed that I asked him those 10 questions at the beginning.
By the way, I think you overloaded him, and
Yeah,
like a rat, he chose the easiest one,
he did. Yeah, I
and
know. Yeah, I made a
then dodged
mistake by doing
everything.
that. I should have certainly just used the 10 minutes to just like give propaganda about, say, how great drive chain is, and then at the end ask him the first question. So that was probably
Yes.
my mistake. But I mean, I would just think if someone, you know, I just think that's it. I gave him the 10 questions. He could have, like, I think a very someone who's really confident that their position is correct, they would have wanted to go through, like they would have made sure to, and we tried to stay on that one of this contradiction of whether or not whether or not it's some kind of requirement that every miner in order to start must run a node, which is not true. So the node is another thing where it's kind of like if you have two miners in a room and they each run their own node, and then they're in the same room, so they look at each other and they say, well, we could only use one of these. I mean, I guess he says that just doesn't work or something, but the reason why that's important is because if two people can share one node, then 50 people can share one. And then if I'm right about the sidechain nodes can live in their own universe, the miners just need to open a connection between one for this blind merge mining thing to work. And then none of them, like everyone can defer to the pools node. Obviously, but of course he contradicts himself because he's also saying that the pool gives an advantage to a big pool who defrays the cost. So we'll never get an answer out of him because his argument requires for it to be both ways. It requires for it to be the case that you can divide the cost of running a node among multiple people, which is the correct way. And it also requires that he has a whole section where it's, do miners need to run a node? Yes. And it's like, it goes on and on and on about that, even though that's not correct. So, but they contradict each other. So I just think, I don't know if, the reason why that's so important to him is because he understands that I have correctly moved all the costs, the like the large block costs, the full node costs. I have moved them off of L1, and he knows that. So he needs to find them somewhere. He's gonna have to rummage around and say, and then he says, oh, here they are. They're the mining costs. And then he also knows that miners pay all kinds of costs, you know, especially for electricity. and for ASICs and for everything else. So
Indeed.
he knows he's got to find something different about these costs. So sure, you have labor, you have whatever, physical security to stop people from stealing the ASIC chips, ASICs, electricity, whatever, labor, to set up some of these things, like to set up like the ERCOT demand management credits, you need like I don't know, I'm not exactly sure, but you need some kind of administrative legal apparatus. So miners have all these costs, cooling, and he's got to find something different about costs that are in the form of software. And what he's hit on, he has kind of flipped a good thing about them, which is that everyone can share the same node that's run by someone who's not even a miner, or someone who is the mining pool, or two miners in the same room can use the same. So he's taken that, which is actually a very useful and helpful thing, and he's trying to flip it around and say it's a bad thing, which it's not. But I mean, he's it's not, I don't think it's a very honest argument. He's trying to find somewhere where this full node cost is paid by. And he admits that it is not, he tacitly admits that it does not affect any actual Bitcoin user, anyone who's running a Bitcoin full node even. So I mean, in a way, he admits that I'm right, but he's got this circuitous path through Miner Town.
I notice he also has another argument, which was rather disingenuous, and I also think groping, like groping in the dark for some sort of legal ramifications. And it goes like this: oh, if you run a miner without the sidechain software, so it seems like he already understands that, right? If there is another bad actor,
right, yeah,
no, he understands this.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah.
This guy's jumping around. He's anyway. He understands that, but then his argument is that but if there is somebody else and they happen to retarget the hash or change the hash, then you are complicit. You are participating in the theft of this Bitcoin. So therefore, the miner will go to prison. Like this, the arrogance of this fellow to sort of like look at these systems and generalize them, these complicated systems, and generalize them to
Yeah, no.
It's the height of Justin Trudeau communist arrogance.
I mean, well, it's like, and we all know that, like, if it's the case that the court order is providing consensus, then the whole proof of work thing just doesn't exist anyway. And in the same paragraph where he complains about that, he has to, of course, he's got to make it about himself. So he complains about Craig as right suing him. But that just proves that lawsuits are, not necessarily connected with the reality or something that we should respect. So I don't understand. Almost every sentence in the piece of writing he produced is wrong, and many of them contradict themselves, like with the sentence right next to it, or a paragraph that is just a little bit later. So I think that he's just thinking like,
it's
this
sophistry.
It's like a performance, and he will look good among some people who are already they're already worried about, I think, what DriveChain will do, because what DriveChain will do is it will fix all the problems in Bitcoin. We won't need the toxic cultural enforcers. We won't need to worry about scale, so we won't need all these weird engineers doing these like overcomplicated things that are doomed. So like, Lightning has turned into basically like a make work scheme, where it's just a never-ending it's like you hire contractors to work on your house, and they just work forever. They don't just get the job done in one day. They it just takes 2 weeks, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And that is what Lightning has become, where it's great if you want a salary as a technical person, but the ethical thing in Bitcoin is to make yourself unnecessary, as unnecessary as possible. You have to purge all human interaction from the software, because you can't have this thing where you need support. But then now we have these LSPs. So anyway, DriveChain will do that. DriveChain will also, like a lot of these people that I just disagreed with in the past because they're weak and they're not strong, and they're not good for Bitcoin. So I just make fun of them on Twitter. They don't want DriveChain will give me a lot of credit. So So I think that that is just what it is, and I mean, I don't know, like I've struggled to like drill a hole into his mind and figure out like what is really there, and does he really care about minor fixed costs, and does he even know what those words mean?
Do you
Because
think?
I don't
Uh-huh.
think so necessarily,
Do
because
you,
I think in economics those are tied to a single decision making context. As I wrote in the reply to him, my written reply is that you don't like if you hire an electrician to come out for the day and they're hired for 8 hours, then they're a fixed cost. And if they finish their work early, now they you can reuse them for free. You can say, well, can you do this other thing also, and then just leave early. Now they have economies of scale and they are a fixed cost. But if you zoom out over the year and you say, well, for every single day we need the electrician, we have to pay this, then they're a variable cost. So, and also as for being a fixed cost versus economy of scale, it depends on the scale. So like if you build a hydroelectric dam, that's a huge upfront fixed cost. Of course, if you zoom out and you take the point of view of the emperor of the continent who will rule for 200 years, then even the hydroelectric dam is a variable cost, because you say, how many hydroelectric dams do I need? How much power do I need? How much is it going to cost per thing? And then if you zoom out, then everything is a variable cost. This is well known. But even it depends on the scale. So you have enormous like the marginal cost, like the demand of the electricity demand of the town could be, it could need like 70% of the dams, the water that can flow through the generators of the dam, and then the other 30% just flows over, the waterfall kind of as normal. In that scenario, the town has, they can easily scale up. They have scale economies. They have already paid the fixed cost of the dam, and then now have a very, very low marginal cost for the next unit of electricity until they're putting 100% of the water through the dam, and then they don't. Then it all flips again around again. Now it's impossible for them to get more electricity out of the dam, no matter what they do as far as dam related costs. And so it depends on the scale. So everything will eventually hit some kind of diminishing returns to scale. Like, just everything will. You cannot have eventually have so many full nodes that the planet becomes a black hole and collapses or something, or runs out of usable energy, and of the available like computing resources of the planet. So I mean that's irrelevant. But what I'm just trying to say is that
it's predator
the
prey. It's the predator prey cycle. What you
things
just mentioned
don't
there.
things don't just have economies of scale like in the piece of writing I used when I replied to him. I said this is like saying that the chemistries of lithium have both heat and pressure. You know what I mean? Like lithium doesn't like have heat. Like that's not what that word means. Like so economies of scale are when you're trying to decide, does the town build a hydroelectric dam, or do they build a bunch of wind turbines? Do they build a coal plant, or do they? You're just trying to say, okay, we forecast this amount, and some of this we'll have to pay no matter how much. You know what I mean? No matter how much electricity you get out of the dam, you must pay the upfront cost. So you see, this is human nature.
This is
It's this very
101
simple
stuff.
thing that you would do to figure
Yeah.
out, like, okay, how do I get the cheapest amount per the what I expected the actual demand will be? And demand is something else that will always have diminishing returns
And
to scale.
anybody who's run the most basic of businesses understand these very basic concepts. Um, okay, so he doesn't
Yeah.
understand them. So
I,
this
I
means
don't, yeah, I don't think that he does. He uses them in a very weird way. He'll say like the economies of Bitcoin mining have economies of scale or something, which is like saying, like the economies of whatever copper wire manufacturer have. I mean, it like kind of depends. Like there's not supposed to be used that way. It's supposed to be like we have two or three choices. This is the expected scale. Like, you see what I mean? You need the expected scale in there, because nothing on a desert island like manufacturing cars certainly doesn't have economies of scale, because there's no roads and there's no people and there's only you. So it's like it depends completely on the context. So I don't know, like, but that's the best that the anti-drive chain people have got. So you have to kind of weirdly engage with this very I don't know, this very like juvenile application of terminology.
Yeah, and also the other one is miners can steal. And this is also a very, very idiotic way of looking at things. So I've taken a stance of and anybody who's run a business and owns a business and invests in businesses will understand what I'm trying to say. If you're like Peter Todd and you basically sit in your bedroom and just go to conferences and whatnot, you probably have no idea how this works. But the way I see it is this: as soon as you get drive chains into Bitcoin, what happens is miners, they might have started out as entrepreneurs setting up a business, the equivalent of setting up a business, but it's almost like when drive chains comes along, it becomes like a rather large company where you actually need a board. Do you see what I mean? A board of that actually are adult supervision over this corporation, which is Bitcoin and the community. Now, what happens now is that these board members, they're going to select execution, the C-class people, the CEO, the CTO, the CMO, and those guys are going to be paid pretty well. Basically, they're just going to manage the workers, right? And their job is to turn a profit, turn a dime, hopefully do useful things to society so that they can aggregate wealth and solve problems. So then the board members will select who's a good set of executors, right? The side chains are such things. So
it's kind of like they each have their own difficulty. I mean, in a way, because it's like the side chains have to compete also against each other. But it's
correct.
But yeah, this is exactly right, where the miners gain the ability to like they can bring the sidechain forth and dismiss it at will. And even if like some sidechain is like interfering with other sidechains, they can take a zoomed out view,
right,
and say what will actually maximize our fees and the market price of the coin. And they delete anything that shouldn't be there, and they call forth anything. Miners could even like sponsor a hackathon or hire someone to create. They could create. They have the power to create and destroy.
Okay, I have a question for you now,
on
Paul.
L2.
So assume for a second you are a serious miner. You've invested multiple millions of dollars in setting up your thing. You have a series of other miners, and you guys have been whittled away over a decade of refining your business, optimizing it to get to this point. And when then there's when there's a halvening, everybody like the bad performers get removed. Now you have side chains, and Peter Todd comes along and he says, I want to create a side chain. And he manages the side chain the way that basically Bitcoin is currently being managed. I ask you, how long is he going to last in this board?
Well, of course, remember, we shouldn't be, it should be up to, the good, what I think the good thing about sidechains is it's about a relationship between the software developers and maintainers and the software itself, since the developers may leave, as Satoshi did.
Right.
So it's a relationship between the design, which is basically the business, as you put it. It's like a dry cleaning place or a food place or something. Yeah. And it's a relationship between them and their customers. So if the fees are there, then and if they think that this overall thing is like helping the exchange rate by having this option, it's like these are rides at Disneyland. We're doing too many metaphors. I mean, I'm doing too many metaphors, but it's like, if they think it adds something, because you know what I mean? Not everyone wants to do like, if you go to, they have a big mix always, because it comes to mind, because if you go to like a theme park, not everyone wants like the really crazy fall ride that's like really, really thrilling. They also have like some of the simple rides, and they have like simple games for like people, so it's like, so they have like a mix. So you'd have like a Zcash sidechain, you'd say, well, maybe it doesn't generate that much in fees, but it allows everyone to obtain privacy if they need it. So you see what I mean? They would be maybe motivated to keep that one around because it helps the whole portfolio. But we wouldn't necessarily need to inject our own opinion. We could just see, hey, is it getting the? And I think that's where the whole thing would improve, because right now we do have this communist USSR style, like, what do we want in Bitcoin? How should we support the code? Our protocol or whatever.
Centralized planning. Good. The 5-year plan.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
works well.
We had roadmaps at one point. We had
Good.
so I think that actually we have gone in the wrong direction with that. And so the good news is he see, this is the great. I want to. There's many great things about this, but one is in that scenario, the miners can just kind of completely ignore this whole thing until there's actual like code, and then they can like run it in like the test environment. So if someone says, "Oh, I'm working on this sidechain," I mean, you always, if you're a miner, you always say, "Great, keep me updated," because
Crack on.
you
Yeah.
say, "I don't care until the software is done. You can't do anything anyway." So you just say, "Great," you just hope that they work on it, and then when it's ready, you can kind of test it out yourself, and you can see like, is this any good? Is this vaporware or is this real? Can I actually see people using this? You have a very clear criterion, which is generate the transaction fees.
Mm.
And it's a great criterion because you can generate fee revenues, one of two ways. You can either have a lot of happy customers that you take a tiny bit from, which that's great, or you can have this new software you've written be so amazing that you can charge higher per fee per transaction. I don't know exactly how that would work in the world of open source, but it's theoretically possible with network effects or something. So if whatever that is, you have, as you say, it's like the board has outsourced part of the job of boosting their own revenue and growing Bitcoin. See, whenever you get more transactions, it's a two for, you get 2 for 1. You get more actual users, you get all this and all the goodness that entails, which is like real feedback to the software people, real feedback in the world. But you also necessarily get more adoption because it's not only a use, but it's more attention to the coin. You know what I mean? Like everyone's trying really hard in the crypto world to like get on different podcasts. We've created this weird media
Mm.
landscape where it's like you want to do marketing, you want to shill, you want to like you just want to get your name out there. Like EOS just did the Times Square ad in 2017, and it was just EOS. Didn't say anything about what it was. It was just the name, and it's like that's. But if you've got actual users, it's spreading by word of mouth. I mean, that's far superior. So you get more transaction fee revenue, but you also be increasing the price as you grow the community and
Yes.
that cash flow.
Talking about getting your name out. I thought of a bit of a conference thing. Assume for a second that Bitcoin has adopted BIP 300. Now, once a year, you have a conference, but it's almost like a kumate. It's like a fight, basically. Currently we can only have 256 side chains, right? Now, assume that we're already at saturation, right? And the miners are looking at this and they're saying, yes, our portfolio is coming along quite nicely, but we have space enough for maybe
Or
10.
even more.
Maybe 10 of those portfolio people are a little bit, on the dodgy side. Let's have a kumate. And then what happens is you get a whole bunch of young, bright sparks with great proposals. They sort of get up on stage, and some of them might be in a financial position to be able to fund the development of this. Some might not. But then, they do their presentation, they do their pitch, and it might be like, Britain's Got Talent type thing, whereby, you get all your miners that yay or nay it on the spot, right? And then some might say, look, I need funding. I need a couple million to develop this. And of course, the miners are looking at this and thinking, I'm interested in funding this sort of thing because it's going to drive, we believe it's got potential. And then on the other side, to make space for those 10 people that got selected, well, you're going to have to vote off the people that are the Peter Todd side chains, basically. Yeah.
Yes. I think competition is always the way to go. But an unfortunate thing is I think that the miners, both when miners support or are against something, including my own project, it's pretty clear to me that they don't have the most amazing understanding of it. I mean, they live in their own world where they're very specialized in finding like cheap power and etc. So they don't. I think they should take. I really think that they should make the decision to take more responsibility for what happens, because actually they are the ones who will, in the long run suffer the most if they screw this up, which I think a lot is being left on the table, like a huge amount. So I think they don't really at this point, because ever since it was probably like SegWit 2x, they have been like very hands off. But even before, something I often recommend is the scaling 2 miner panel that had like 95% of the hash rate on stage. But they clearly just don't know what to do, and this leaves them vulnerable to, just people coming up to them and telling them you should do this or you shouldn't do this. So just without without editorializing too much, what happened was the miners had no idea what to do during the block size dispute, and so they did nothing for a while, and then the large blockers persuaded them to persuaded enough of them to block SegWit, and then persuaded enough of them to hold it hostage for SegWit 2x, and then persuaded them, and then somehow they changed their mind to not do that, but it was because SegWit 2x was a losing idea. But the point is, they are kind of like easily just batted around by. They don't seem to have like a very deep understanding where it's like they know every inch of the issues, and they say they know exactly why they're doing things. So I think that they're not very technical people, as we in the Bitcoin technical community would use that term. But even though they're of course extremely technical in their own way, they have their own, and it's clear things like Ocean, Luke Dash Jr.'s new pool, I think they show very clearly that how specialized mining has become, and to the point where other Bitcoiners don't even understand it. I mean, I didn't even know that there were firmware discounts and these. I mean, I guess it was kind of obvious at one point that because of the way Antpool and Bitmain were organized, that there was like vertical integration. I knew there's always been vertical integration, but like Luke is a super expert, and he ran a pool that found thousands of blocks for years. But now he started his new pool, and with the exception of 2 blocks that he found like on December 1st and 3rd, which I think were either just with rented hash power or, you know what I mean, something to like help kick it off with some momentum. With the exception of that, they have not found a single pool, and their pool design does not achieve any of the objectives that they say that it does. And the miners have correctly realized that it does not. So this is a scenario where people can have enormous prestige and expertise and fail completely to participate, even join the network of miners.
Yeah. There's another direction that's rather worrying to me. Anybody who hasn't got their head shoved up their asses knows that Lightning's falling apart. There's too many moving pieces. It's a convoluted mess that was designed and created in Silly Valley. A bunch of VCs stacked loads of money behind it. This is supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And guess what? It doesn't work very well. It's pathetic.
Well, yes. I mean, we don't want it to like we don't want to impugn the people with the bad motives. Unfortunately, I think are the marketing people who they just picked up on this meme of, okay, there's like a bunch of people who they don't even use Lightning themselves, but they like Bitcoin and they want Bitcoin. They want to pump the Bitcoin bag, which we all want to some extent. But what they have concluded is Bitcoin is good. Lightning helps Bitcoin. So we don't want anyone to make fun of Lightning or criticize Lightning. I mean, but I had Anthony Riard on our Twitter space 2 weeks ago, I think. And he is a leading expert, and he has decided to just quit. He says there's no future for a tech person to do that after investing all the time, and learning the code and the design and he's decided that he's just going to look for something else to do because it's so hopeless. And even I asked him some pretty normal questions, tame questions, and I was very surprised. I mean, he went as far as to say, he said very casually, he was just very friendly, very kind of jovial even, but he was saying like, you don't, there's a lot of the VCs don't want anyone to invalidate their investment thesis. So he's like explaining like, why is it that there's such a difference between like the opinion of the technical people who work on Lightning every day. I mean, this is like kind of like this is going to become like a Theranos style, like Enron situation where there's like people working on the blood machine every day or know that it doesn't work, and yet then there's like, great woman CEO revenge story that everyone is a feel good story that we all love a feel good story, right? She quit Stanford and no one believed in her, and now she's
Rags to riches.
she whatever, so, and that's the issue is, so this is the issue, is the cultural thing. It's not any problem with any code or anything. It is because you can just change the code if once everyone knows what to do. You can easily you could just change, you could activate the 300, or you could do some other thing, you can do plenty of things. The problem is the culture has actually become complacent and overconfident, but also it's just diluted in other ways, like that are these parasites have installed themselves, which include the Lightning VCs. And but it's also just includes like whatever, like anyone selling a book or even a conference. Not these people are not necessarily in a symbiotic relationship with Bitcoin, and especially when you see people who are like the cultural enforcers who are saying like no true Bitcoiner, this, or people who are just being rude and obnoxious and not growing the church, getting more people in. If you're not doing that, then you aren't you are a parasite. Yeah, that's how it is.
Well, a friend of mine went to one of these Lightning conferences, and he was like, it's one of the most stale, boring places he's ever been
Horrible.
to.
It is. I don't understand how like more people don't see it. I mean, if you go, I went to I think TabConf is the best technical conference, but for the last 2 years, like, it's like more than half of the content is Lightning. But it's like when it's Lightning, everyone's just sitting there in the things like at their computer. The person gives up, and they always give a talk like this. They always say, here's an incredibly difficult problem. It's very arcane that I've discovered with Lightning, but we can solve it with this or this or this. And then they go through their solution, and it's very complicated. And but they have some kind of solution to this weird edge case. You've never even heard of this. You've like yet another Lightning problem, as if the inability to onboard people to it wasn't enough, like just right out of the gate, or as if the fact that it doesn't work when the fee rates are unstable. Like you just think like, okay, these two things alone would just kill the idea. But they have like this thing, they've discovered their own weird channel jamming thing, and well, we can do it with this. We'll add these fees. And then they end, and then everyone claps, and they sit down, and then it kind of repeats. And it reminded me a lot of academia, where it's like the goal is to find like a weird problem, impress everyone with how you were able to solve it somehow, and then just kind of quietly sit down. And it doesn't matter that none of this is, in the real world, you would just pull the plug on this idea, because it's the likelihood that it will translate to satisfying the needs of the end user is very low. Although there's probably some niche, where like the ability to sign and rapidly iterate. It will have some niche, but it's certainly not scaling Messiah. And but one thing that I want to stress is that at TabConf 2 conferences ago, which I believe is September, there was Macro did a big talk that was like Lightning is broken. That was the title, and then the content was, matched the title. It was very persuasive. And this is on the main stage, and everyone claps, and then everyone just goes about what they're doing. And then someone who's very senior in the community, like a couple months later, I was talking with this person, and they were like, you know what? Everyone just, like the Lightning is broken, but we all just keep doing it, or something like that. And then next TabConf, still there's like all this Lightning content, Lightning, everything's Lightning. Lightning are sponsors, and someone said that we had more people slowly coming, speaking in person, like not at the event, but like when we're having dinner and stuff, people would say Lightning is broken. And then Barack, who is the last 2 TabConfs ago, he was breaking Lightning with his funny little hacks, and then he had invented Arc, so he was talking about Arc. This one, in his Arc or whiteboard masterclass video, I mean, he practically starts it off like the first four sentences or something like. I mean, he starts it off the intro, and then he's like, so we all know that Lightning is broken, and this project is about trying to fix some of the bigger problems in Lightning, and just like with the different. So so there has been disillusionment, but many people on Twitter still haven't caught up to. And I think Peter Todd is an example of someone who I don't think has actually caught up. He doesn't realize that the people are leaving the sinking ship, which is weird because normally when people are kind of smooth operators like that, they're very aware of where everyone else is. Which so it's very bizarre that he. But I think he's got a lot riding on with RGB, and I don't know exactly what the status of everyone's like. I don't know what everyone's projects are, but I think that what the project people are working on obviously biases them. Anyway, Lightning, I think it'll be interesting to track how it actually goes away culturally. Like, will it like slowly fade out? Will it be like COVID, where everyone just kind of pretends like we try to pretend like that never happened or something? Or will it be like, which is kind of my suspicion. I think the COVID model is a good guess, but it's also possible there will be like something like Theranos, where there'll just be like there'll be like huge ruptures, like the article just saying that it's a fraud, and then they're failing to reply to it, and then like they get like the whistleblower investigated, and then it just like explodes. So I don't know, but the fact that it's currently not incentive compatible even on its own terms with respect to like the need for op expire now. Even HTLCs don't work. The HTLCs don't work when the fees are high anyway. So if fees stay high, then just no one will really be using the Lightning Network. They will just be passing funds, custodially. They will be like fronting someone the money without any guarantee that they will get reimbursed, which is why it's all more than half of it goes to LSPs. So the whole thing is going to collapse, and eventually. And the only question is, I guess, if I think that probably a lot of LNVCs are just going to try to like dump their shares, and they want to keep the narrative going. And now this whole thing has become a disastrous cultural problem for Bitcoin, unfortunately.
Yeah, and also one thing that's happening is that the folks like Peter Todd with their heads in the ground like ostriches, even though they don't do that. But what's happening is I think in 2014, 15, he was one of the big naysayers of side chains, and that's caused irreparable damage to
like it's impossible to overstate. I think. I mean, like it would be like we would have had scalability, privacy. We would have had the exchanges would not have even had as much influence, because
sure,
there'd be a situation where we would have sprinted directly to a situation where you could like buy Bitcoin at like a CVS or something with like a little card. Like there would have been like BitInstant, like Redo or something. And
I argue we might be in a situation where we're actually making transactions with each other in Bitcoin had there been something like BIP 300. You see, what I'm trying to say is that Bitcoin is impossible to scale to everyone in the world, and Lightning has also demonstrated that this was supposed to be the panacea, the solution to it all, the final, the great solution. But that's not happening, and instead, what is happening is that people are making transactions with each other over centralized custodian solutions, like with exchanges.
And exactly what we don't want.
And Lightning is going to evolve. The only way Lightning can actually work is if it works with become a massive custodial type scennario. And I believe there was one of these apps. I think was it Phoenix? I think was it Phoenix that was centralized, and everyone was like fapping on about how great it was, but it's all centralized. Have we not learned our lesson from FTX?
I mean, the good paradigm is Wallet of Satoshi, where
that's the one.
It has completed the hero's journey. Like there's only a couple ways that it ends, but it started, it grew, and then it had to ban all US customers because it is in fact custodial. So it is completed. But I mean, other things that are possible are like, I mean, is it not likely that, imagine what if you're Coinbase, wouldn't you buy? You would like buy one of the non-custodial, we'd buy like Moon or something, and you just vertically integrate it because it's all custodial anyway. You just say, okay, this is a great deal for Coinbase. You can just spend whatever it is, $2 billion, who cares? And just acquire the brand and the app. And they're all, but that does remind me of a great tweet that I saw about it was the tweet went something like this, quote, I don't know who needs to hear this, but scanning a custodial QR app is not an innovation or something. It's like so that's okay, but that's where we are. We will regress to Venmo. So really the Lightning people have taken us into a place that is basically what the worst case scenario of large blockism was, which is that people they can't run a node and they don't know the status of their own money without talking to like an API. So we have already achieved the worst case scenario of large blockism via Lightning. So that's I don't know why, and more people are starting to realize that, because there's a lot of people out there who are, of course, it's very easy to just be a bullshitter, right? So you get up there and you say a bunch of vague stuff. Just we could name some people. I mean, like a Michael Saylor, Max Kaiser, like they're not exactly, Michael Saylor isn't exactly going up there and saying, okay, in this file on this line of code should be a 3 instead of a 2. It's not exactly like a pinpoint laser guided missile precision. He's just saying, a Bitcoin is encrypted energy, and the crowd goes wild. So, that's great. I mean, we need people like that. One of the best things I ever heard in my entire life, the cleverest things, I think, was a Milton Friedman saying that there's idea manufacturers, and then there's idea, distributors and wholesalers, and there's idea retailers. And that's a profound truth, which is that people who come up with ideas, they're often not the best. You need there's like a Satoshi, and then there's like an Andreas Antonopoulos, So then there's people like you and me. You fall on the continuum somewhere. And even the people who listen, like someone who listens to a podcast but never goes on a podcast, that person is probably like a relatively like intellectual type of person, and they have to tell it to their friends at like the bar or at the house party or something. So even maybe they are even the retailers. So, but the point is, there's no reason to say that one person is sort of better than the other. These are all different jobs that everyone that must be done in order for an idea to make it from not existing at all to being pervasively adopted by everyone around the world. So yeah, Michael Saylor he's sort of near the retailer end, and he's pumping these ideas, and but it's very easy to be vague, and what that's good in some ways, but it's it has the negative property that it's the Theranos problem. So this is the Lightning Theranos metaphor, where a lot of people have all these beliefs about Lightning. Lightning will fix everything. We'll do the Zcash sidechain on top of Lightning, or people say stuff like that when it's like, okay, they don't really know what the word Lightning means, but they know that something will happen. And so that's just something that everyone should be aware of, I suppose.
Yeah. I want to ask you, right, maybe a more controversial thing. I think it's quite conclusive now that at the end of the debate, the very end, I believe, was where he was asking for his money. That's what Peter was asking for, his money, which I thought was quite telling. Quite telling indeed. And another thing,
I mean, hey, we hired him to do a job. He did the job a bit kind of marginally, but you know what I mean? Like
okay, I get it. I get it. But if you're supposed,
it's more about me showing to the world that, like, listen, I really, I tried with this guy. I feel like
oh, is that what it is about? Okay.
I think, I think
so
my thought was, I will at least get something. I'll get something out of it. Like, so either I'll be able to show the world I tried with this guy, or he'll identify something important, or like, I don't know, he will show the world that he There's like an opportunity to because he's complained about this idea for years and years, and
He's got
he's
nothing.
never been specific, and honestly, he's still not specific because what he produced self contradicted itself in unbelievably important ways.
Yeah,
The whole argument hinges on miners being required to run sidechain nodes, even though that's not true at all, and
yeah.
he even admits that it's not true in the other parts. And then the whole argument also hinges on miner centralization, and he has eight different definitions and measurements of it that all contradict each other completely, and most of which have nothing to do with BIP 300. So it's true that we still don't get anything out of it, but I think we can now be confident, that his opposition to the idea is just based on some kind of like, it's like he's working on RGB, or he
He
just
can be
doesn't want to
disregarded.
admit that he was wrong or something like that.
He can be disregarded from the equation. He's
Oh, yeah.
he's insubstantial. He should be asked to leave the stage. Thank you very much. Stop wasting everybody's time and causing more damage. Now on to the more controversial question. Right.
But
When the
what I
steam
thought you were going to say, okay, sorry, go
when the
ahead.
steam engine. Okay, what did you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to ask, because at the very end, I asked him, which is like the normal science question. I asked him, well, is there anything that would, he's like, I don't like this idea. And I was like, is there anything that would make you like this
Change
idea?
your
Is
mind.
there
And
anything
he
that
was
change
like,
your mind?
well, no, I
He
don't
said
think
no.
so.
And he didn't really own the no. He tried to like waffle for a little bit, and then he was like, no.
Yes.
So
Actually,
this is
that's
kind
what
of like,
that is what I wanted to say.
yeah.
Thank you very much for catching me.
Oh, good. Yeah. Because that's always telling too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very important question, of course, because of the Karl Popper falsifiability science type thing.
Yes.
But it's a difficult in practice when that question is sprung on people. They usually are. It usually is difficult to answer on the spot.
Hmm.
But my guess is that Peter will never be able to answer it on the spot or after hours of
No,
reflection either. And I think it's telling that for with the large block versus small block dispute, I really know what both sides would have said. They would have said something like, I mean, I think some of them are deluded and crazy people, and they were just in it for fun and they had no idea what was going on. But you could have gone back into the scaling war and said to the large blockers, like, what is there anything that would make you not want the block size increase? And they would say yes, because all we want is for everyone to be able to use Bitcoin at a reasonable experience and a reasonable fee rate. So if something is built that does that, that doesn't involve the large block L1, we'll go for that. And similarly, you could have flipped it, and I would have known immediately like the right answer on the small block size. Is there anything that would persuade you that you should we should have large block size increase, or an unlimited block size, or whatever? That would be, will it still be cheap to run the node, or do we actually know what the final block size is, or we're going to have to keep changing it? Because that was another very reasonable thing to say. So we can't keep changing it. We have to change it. Are we going to change it once, or are we going to just change it every 2 years? And how's that going to look? So I would have been able to answer it kind of on the spot for both sides of the block size debate back in 2015, 2016, I think. So, he didn't answer it. So, you know what that means, though. It means that it's driven by something other than the content of the idea. He just doesn't like it for some other reason.
Yeah, no, whatever that reason is made him, he's now irrelevant. The man is irrelevant. He's representing some sort of a decaying, old, out of date, decrepit thing
Well, he should certainly try to answer the first 2 or 3 of the 10 questions if he wants to
he
rejoin the
can't.
conversation.
He
Yeah,
can't. He
he's not going
can't.
to, though.
He
Yeah.
can't. So now we have demonstrated that this is the all that can be done has been done. All stones that have been left, all stones have been
Yeah.
turned. And
Well, yes.
now where to from here, Paul? This is the question.
Well, I
Because
think we're going to
when you have
continue.
because when it's the time for the steam engine to be created, once that invention is in, there's no stopping it. There is no stopping it. And right now we've got a scenario whereby, basically the competitors, the Swift network, this board that I spoke about, whereby the miners need to man up and become board members and oversee execution, the C class. What happens is the whole network is essentially taking on. Okay. Now I will weave this part into my question. Essentially we're taking on the legacy financial system, And here's the key point. Central banks are recognizing the power of this technology. They're starting to look at these exchanges and saying, well, we could do what FTX did and Binance did. We just have to put the population of the earth into or the country onto this particular website, and we will manage the toing and froing of the currency. This means that banks are cut out. This means that the central banks become the enemies of the banks, the retail banks. Now, how about this for a scenario? Excuse me. How about this for a scenario? Assume for a second you have BIP 300 merged into Bitcoin, and you have a side chain for each of the banks. This way, now the banks are starting to use I say this because a large majority of the people have no idea how to use Bitcoin. So this puts in a familiar interface with the population of the country and the typical Swift type network. And instead, what happens is these banks, who they're looking at their central banks, and they're realizing that now all of a sudden they're in the crosshairs, you see, and they start to think, we can fight back. We can fight back if we all agree to.
Oh yeah, that would be neat. I think what I would like to stress is that, again, the sidechain, I take no idea. I mean, I personally have all kinds of thoughts on what I think is a good idea versus not. But the point of BIP 300 is,
did you say this is not a good idea?
Just to say that it should be up to me. Is that try anything on any spectrum of decentralization? You know, have Luke Dash Jr. size tiny blocks, have Roger Ver size blocks, have unlimited size blocks, or have something
Paul,
that is
okay. I get it. But your mind operates in a different way. You see, what normal human beings need some sort of a narrative. Like the Bitcoin price is going to shoot up next year sometime. Maybe it is, but the media are going to fabricate some sort of a narrative. It might be completely and utterly inaccurate. But also, what I'm doing is I'm looking at society. I'm seeing where the actors are. I'm seeing the psychology. I'm seeing that the banks are going to be in a position where they're going to have they're in the line of sights of the central banks who can cut them out. So this gives them a tool to be able to interface and work with each other.
Experience. They're like a big custodial app. They can call themselves a Lightning app if they want. I mean, apparently it doesn't make any difference.
Whatever.
So,
but it doesn't stop, because any bank or any individual can participate in that network, just like it's permissionless. So, but what happens there?
Yes, of course. Well, I just like to say that I have done some of the math. It doesn't actually take that much. You only need like 10 or so side chains that are only, 10 or a little bit bigger than the Bitcoin core that we already have. And you even have things like Solana, the actual total cost for running the software in terms of like the server, etc., RAM and everything. It's only a few $1,000s a year. So all the data that I've seen suggests that it will be very, very cheap even to run nodes that can actually have everything be an on-blockchain transaction for the entire world's transaction throughput. So I think so we won't really need, but for the user, in terms of we will not hit the scale ceiling technologically, but in terms of,
but you're not factoring in Metcalfe's law.
Yeah, well, what do you mean?
Well, Metcalfe's law is a network becomes more and more useful the more nodes that get participate in it.
Yes,
you see what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
So, like the telephone network, or in the case of the Bitcoin network, assume for a second that you onboard a bank per side chain, and then they bring all their customers onto that side chain. It becomes more and more and more and more valuable, because if, for example, I wanted to use HSBC, I could take my money out of HSBC, sink it down into BTC, and then move it into Standard Chartered Bank, for example, and then I can, and and also as a result of this, each of the countries are more likely to adopt this because they can control their own monetary policy. The reality is that we are in a world where countries and we elect these people because most of the people are stupid and they are unable to operate on these different levels. So they can't. I don't know. Anyway, I suppose I will.
Yeah, maybe.
But there is going to be
I want to
monetary
just stress
policy.
that what BIP 300 does is it says it doesn't matter if something is a fiat project or an altcoin project, or an Ethereum whatever it is, you can turn it into a Bitcoin project and have it use 21 million BTC and have it pay fees to the L1 miners. So I think that we should have like a Solana type thing. Like we should have something where you push the envelope on decentralization down, so like you become more centralized, you go in the bad direction, but you see like how far can we get and still have enough of the good properties of decentralization that we like. And then we should have, things should go in all the different directions, and including various levels of integration with corporations or even the government or whatever, like El Salvador, people love that. The Chivo wallet is
centralized as fuck.
It is. They must use their equivalent of the social security number. It's tied to their identity. It is fully custodial. It is fully KYC'd. So it's, in many ways, it is a CBDC nightmare outcome. But it's got the word Bitcoin slapped onto it. And I would just like to say about that even though it's a very disappointing outcome so far, but I do think Rome wasn't built in a day, and that guy he should be given enough rope to hang himself. If maybe he can make, I think it's possible that he will turn into another Latin American dictator and just steal all the money and leave. And but it's also possible that he will make it work, and he has not had enough time to make it work. It's very hard. Those people are obviously they're not the most educated or technologically sophisticated population that you've got to play the cards you're dealt. And he does seem to be, he has an unbelievably high approval rating. I mean, it's always, whenever you throw a lot of people in prison, you've got to watch that approval rating though, because you never know if are they doing a great job of cleaning it up, or are they just going to throw everyone in jail if they don't vote yes. But
he's great.
So I think that, right, exactly. It's like, what's the approval rating in North Korea? But
if they don't clap hard enough as when he walks in the room, well, that's it. You're done. You're dead. I
know quite a few people who have. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know quite a few people who visited the country, and usually they come back with kind of like a mixed review, which is what you would expect, which is sometimes I could use Bitcoin, it was great, and other times they had no idea what I was talking about, or they said that I could use Bitcoin, but then they didn't. I didn't actually paid with cash half the time. So I think that, but I will definitely say this, even though it has been years, it is not enough to do what they want to do. That would take a while for even the most organized person. Maybe Napoleon could do it, because apparently there's all these funny stories about when he was exiled to that one island, the first
Mount
island,
St. Helena.
He will completely revolutionize the culture, legal system, and economy, and opened mines and opened harbors and stuff. So apparently some people are just good at that kind of thing, but that's a big project. So we'll see. Learn from that experiment, hopefully.
So okay, all stones are left are overturned. They were all investigated. How to get this into BIP3? How to get BIP 300 into Bitcoin? Or does one fork? Now, keep in mind, there is a perverted incentive. You can see a lot of the Bitcoiners, what they do is they don't really care about the community. I mean, even though on one hand they're busy shilling that, yes, Bitcoin to the moon, and the only way for Bitcoin to get to the moon is by the whole world adopting Bitcoin. But then on the other hand, don't fucking change anything about it. And if you do change it, fork Bitcoin, because we want to double our Bitcoin. We want to have, and then what happens is you divide the community, and then all of a sudden now you have. And in networking, I don't want to get too technical that way. Yeah, it's called the end-to-end principle. And basically, you don't want to have complexity in the middle. In other words, you don't want to have multiple different currencies. It would be good to have a single currency.
My view is that one currency will ultimately win, even if cryptocurrency had never been invented. But now that you have an internet currency, it's just too difficult to have the smallest currency. You're in such a precarious spot.
Yeah.
And you really want to use the money that most other people are using, and just like you want to speak the language that most other people are speaking. It's just too much of a risk of a malinvestment. You lose if you put money into a form of money that you lose. That's just a big risk. And people, like when you go to Japan, we all use yen, and when you go to Europe, we all use the euro. You could go, it would be an interesting experiment if you could take like a briefcase full of yen, like a ton of yen, to like something that's not a hotel or an airport, but that's like sophisticated enough. Like you would go in and like a nice restaurant or something in Rome, maybe, and say, will you take yen? This is like $8,000 worth of yen. Can you take and just see like if they would do it or not? That would be a neat thing. This would be a neat experiment for someone to run. Like how is much as the cultural lock-in? Like if you like, I assume you've been to Japan. I've been to Japan.
I'm actually going to. I'm going. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So when I was in Japan, I was thinking like even if I had hundreds of dollars US, just like it's so culturally. Like it is very, very, the culture is very, it's first of all, it's a great culture, but it's also, and I don't really want to say insular, even though it is.
Oh, it's very insular. No, it's very insular.
But what I'm trying to say is like they're very happy where they are,
Yeah.
they like their thing and they should be very proud because they have a great culture, but it's like they're dialed in, and I was thinking like, even like, the Allies occupied this country and like the US was like ruling the country. Sort of, and to some extent, there's like all this geopolitical history that we're all familiar with. But still, I was thinking like, if I took out cash, I don't think I would be able to like pay like, and they would just be like, what is this? But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But because even the U.S. dollar is kind of its own special position, because the U.S. dollar is everything settles in the U.S. dollar, and by volume, much more than 80% of all Forex trading has the US dollar as one of the two pairs. So the US dollar is utterly dominant. But even then, I think like would probably not, they would, you'd probably need a steep premium of like 200%, on the official exchange. Right. You have to take out your phone and say, this is something. And they maybe at a certain point, 200% or 2 or 3x or 4x the value, they would say, okay, whatever, this person's clearly lost. I'm doing someone a favor. I'll take they'd have to like look up pictures. Like it would be, that's the question. This would be an interesting empirical question. Is all I'm saying is like how much loyalty do people have to their the currency that they mostly use? I think it's a lot, but I would love to know. I'd love to see someone figure that out somehow.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, so that's the problem with the fork, though. You see, that's the you see, it's all metaphor for your question.
Which is basically, I mean. If the stalwarts are not moving, they're not budging, and the people are incapable of understanding this, and there's not enough of a groundswell for this to come about.
Yes.
Here's the other thing. I wanted to go into this. The Bcash fork was initiated by I don't know Roger very well. I've never met him. I know that he's recently got his black belt in jiu-jitsu. And I also
very good at that. He was on YouTube when I first sort of looked him up. He has all these like Brazilian jiu-jitsu videos that were like before Bitcoin or something. So he's So I wouldn't want to get into a fight with him. He could probably like.
No, I can't wait. I can't wait to roll with the guy because I mean I love doing jiu-jitsu and I think he's going to be a great opponent. I love it when there's a foreigner who walks into our gym, like a sizable, strapping person.
You're
It's
really
just,
good at it also, yeah. I mean, I've
yeah,
heard
yeah,
that
yeah,
they
yeah,
say
yeah,
it's
yeah,
the
yeah.
chess of martial arts because
It's
like it's
exactly,
very
exactly.
cerebral, they say, yeah.
Well, also it's like solving problems under pressure. So,
Yeah.
you don't put yourself in a compromising position, and you learn like you have to really tap quickly, otherwise you're going to get your arm
You
broken
can
or
get
something like
really
that.
injured, but the person has total control over whether or not they will like choke you out or break your arm off or
Exactly,
something. So it's
exactly.
like it's the grappling arts. Say what can I say?
It's
They
fantastic.
say it's really something. Yeah.
It's so much fun. But also from another perspective, it's I think we evolved on the plains of the savanna plains of Africa, and we've always been in scenarios where we'd like fight or flight type situations. And in this modern world, when are you going to get like a fight or flight situation? So I get that on the mat. I get that all
Yeah.
the time. And
Oh,
from
that's fun.
another
I know a lot of people love it.
yeah,
So
well, from another
yeah.
perspective, it's like, going to the office is quite so much stressful. No, fuck off. That's not stressful. What's stressful is being strangled and having your arm broken 3 times a week.
I think Sam Harris made like an essay or something because he also does Brazilian, and I think it was called like the joy of drowning or something like that, like of like being choked or like you die over and over again when you do Brazilian. It was all about Brazilian jiu-jitsu and like you die and then you like come back and you something. I'm
Well,
probably butchering it, but it's something like that.
I think I know what you mean, but like that's what thoughts are. Thoughts and conversation and free speech is so that we're able to communicate these problems and these issues before we come to blows. We
Yes.
don't take up arms
Yes, we
because
want
we
our
can talk about
theories.
it. And in
Our theories
jiu-jitsu,
should die in our place.
it's basically it's like you just roll. You're doing a combat, but then you
Yes.
just tap and it's over,
Then it's
and
over. Yeah.
you just redo it and you keep on doing it. It's fantastic. Um,
Anyway, you were
yeah,
talking about Roger.
yeah,
Yeah.
Roger. Okay,
Got a
so
little
Roger Ver,
distracted there.
Roger Ver, he and yeah, I think that's I can see why he's got the power to sort of like drive through because you need to be a stubborn bastard when you do like things like jujitsu. I tell you. But maybe there wasn't the greatest of technical arguments behind Bcash. The value offering was not significantly higher than that of Bitcoin. But in
Well,
the
it's very
case,
funny. Sorry, continue.
but in the case of, for example, a fork of Bitcoin, whereby you've got BIP 300 in it, I honestly think that the value offering is significant.
Well, there's a lot to
Significant.
say there. I mean, first of all, we have not actually left every single stone unturned. So I still have to actually, because our test network is old and we have to update it. And this is one of the problems with Bitcoin Cash that it did not. It's very funny. There's so many directions I'd like to go from here, but it's like people often think of me as like a large blocker, Roger Ver aligned, which is true that I was hoping that everyone would get what they wanted out of the scaling war, including Roger. Um, Even though I was always a small blocker and I was signed the thing against Segwit 2x, and I wrote this blog post against the hard fork, and so it's just kind of interesting that I don't know. I'm perceived in kind of everyone perceives me in kind of like a very gray, suspicious way sometimes, which I think is exactly where I want to be. So perfect. But the what I was going to try to say is that I was so critical of Bitcoin Cash. I thought, I mean, I constantly was telling them to do things differently, and I had this table of mistakes that they had made that I published at the time, like when it was happening, and since also. And I go on their podcast and I tell them that they have no hope really, and they should give up. But still, people think that I am I don't know, a large blocker or something like that. And yes, they did make many mistakes, and well, we could go into them because any fork that would be successful must avoid those mistakes. The stones that still haven't been unturned is like we have to have the actual software where I have to actually have an actual proposal of what Bitcoin miners should run and users, of course, which right now we don't because the test network is old. So actually, it's the last stone is my own kind of. In part, I did it for a very virtuous reason. I wanted the community to understand the idea and get excited about it first, and then like maybe help build it also. But I still have to do this last step. This would be the last stone, but which is that, I have to give people something to that the actual Bitcoiners, BTC people would run. Which I think I will actually be able to do very soon, probably by the end of January. I mean, I hope. Maybe I just totally jinxed myself there. I'm not sure. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But
Okay, no, I mean, just.
but that will be the final stone. So I'll let you know. You'll be
Is
be
this
one
a
of the first to
surprise
know.
thing? Is it a surprise veal?
No, this is just going to be
What's
like
the deliverable?
I'm saying this. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is I will be. It will be software that the miners can actually run to activate BIP300, which
So
has not
BIP3,
currently doesn't exist in a reasonable form. It has to exist. It has to exist. Not only does it have to exist and be free of bugs and everything, but it also has to be something that does not interfere or interact with whatever the people doing in Bitcoin Core, like the Bitcoin Core. It has to either go through the Bitcoin Core process, which now I think will take too long, or it has to just interface with it. So I'll release that. And we can talk about that also, but now we have 4 or 5 different threads now about what
let's
problems
knock them
did
off.
Bitcoin Cash do that we should avoid.
What are the 4 different ones? Let's give them high level names. We've got the sister software, the side software, or the software.
Oh, you're talking about the deliverable. Yeah,
the deliverable. Okay, the deliverable. We've got the
well, I think one
good
would be
points
like
of the mistakes
yeah,
not
you're
to
referring to
repeat.
something we talked about this. Yeah, so this is what is actually going to happen is there will be Bitcoin Core will be unmodified, and that will be piloted by like this kind of like you can call it whatever you like, fork activator or like driver or like an executive type of a thing at the
Rules
top.
engine. Can we
Apex
call it
rules engine. That's like that. That's good.
Okay.
So this thing will be a very simple thing that only its job is to scan a block. It'll be on the block. There's a mempool side, so there's mining side, and then there's block validation side, block construction, block validation. But what it will do is it will just its job is to like load a little maybe we should explain the other thing first because it's much easier. You have Bitcoin Core, and then you have this thing that will just check to see if any BIP 301 rules are being violated.
So this is
So
the
that's
rules
like
engine, right?
this would be like the drive chain auditor thing.
Okay, let's give
The
them
sister
names. Let's
thing.
give these
Yeah.
things names.
Okay, we'll call it the drive chain auditor then.
Okay, okay now so the drive chain or now we're going to give a definition for the drive chain auditor.
Yes,
the drive chain. Okay, I say it and then you correct me or not.
Sure.
So the drive chain auditor is a small piece of software. It's an executable that executes on a separate process from the mining software. It is deliberately small and tight and written in maybe even literal style code, so you have the English and well documented, and it's very, very clear about what it does. Is that the drive chain auditor?
This is the top thing. You've flipped them.
Okay. So what you see, this is why we're giving names. This is the reason why we're giving names. So
that's why I called it BIP 300 auditor, because it is tied intimately to BIP 300. So you could have a 119 auditor, like a CTV auditor. You could have multiple ones. So these would be like these are things that it's like Jeremy Rubin would just make the 119 thing. It's between him and that, and then but the small thing is the Apex thing.
So let's not bring in Jeremy, all of these things. Let's just keep it down to so we've got the basic flow. We've got blocks would come in. They come in. We're going to check a set of rules to see whether a block accords with BIP 300 rules or not. Now, we need to check to see what. So these blocks are going to come in. They're going to be filtered off into another process, I'm assuming, which is going to be this rules engine. And then the output of this rules engine is to say yay or nay to a block. If it passes, then it goes. If the block passes the BIP 300 rules, then it will be merged. Well, it'll be merged onto the blockchain, the rest of the blockchain. Correct?
Yeah, you can think of it as a bunch of filters. So it's like the whole thing is this one thing, but then you have Bitcoin Core would be like the first filter, and then there'd be like the BIP 300 auditor thing that's going to scan for the BIP 300 rules. And then if you wanted to, you could install more filters, but we're going to forget about those right now because
Let's
you
not,
said,
let's keep
but
it
you could have
simple.
119, you could have other
No, 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 keep it simple. Keep it simple. Okay,
119.
continue.
Then
So
the
you,
whole
so you're gonna,
the
okay,
fact that it
so
must
the
be
block,
threaded
okay,
through
so
them all.
the
That is,
block will go through this. It
yeah,
checks the rules, and if it's a yay, then it continues through to the next phase. What is the next
right.
phase?
Well, first it has to do all the Bitcoin Core rules,
Got
and
it.
this the whole point of this is so that I no longer have to touch Bitcoin Core, and if they release a new version, I don't have to rebase or anything. I just plug it back in. You know, the if they
Yes.
update to Bitcoin Core 27, you just put that one back in. You know, you upgrade. So you can
Got it.
upgrade that without touching either the BIP 300 part or
Got it.
the apparatus that holds the whole thing.
Okay, got it.
So the three are the apparatus that holds the whole thing, Bitcoin Core that's not modified, and then the BIP 300 part.
So
Those are
this
the two filters.
process is essentially a way of reintroducing the concept of soft forking back into Bitcoin. Dude,
Yes.
you are solving a really, really important problem.
Yeah, I know.
Screw BIP 300. This in and of itself is absolutely a great innovation. You're bringing value to the table. Thank
You
you.
know, yeah, well, thanks. But you know what I think is kind of ironic is I really thought that the prediction markets idea was like a great idea. It was like huge risk, huge reward, and then I had to move to drive chain because I was like, this is way, way simpler, and this solves all Bitcoin's like governance, scalability, privacy problems. And now, yeah, this will be the simplest thing ever, and it will solve kind of a not quite as big, but the point is, my career has taken me into like the most simplest direction. One I could ever thought. But yeah, I think that this will be good if if people like this, you know, if miners like this, then what it will do basically is allow the Bitcoin Core to kind of go their own way, and they don't need to even worry about software, which they have demonstrated numerous times that they do not want to have anything to do with the soft forks because they find soft fork activation to be like stressful and annoying. So this is the kind of way of just sort of like taking it out of their hands, and I think it's a good idea. Um, we'll have to see if they go for it because they while they are they're all in on Bitcoin and they want Bitcoin to succeed. Like I said, they are usually I found them to be baffled often by even the simplest technical commentary, and sometimes even people who support me, I get a little nervous because I was like, do they really know like what they're supporting? Like I don't know. So we'll have to have this all laid out. But this is why the thing that holds all the filters, that is the very small thing. The each individual filter can be of unlimited complexity and it can have terrible code really because you can pull them out and replace them. So that's why it's better because now the miner only needs to understand why it is they have the filter box. That thing should be like 200 lines of code. And then the that's why you didn't want to talk about this, but I have to keep bringing it up. That's why you could have a 119. You could have another filter where it's like some other thing, Jeremy Rubin's thing. That now you see the benefit is Jeremy doesn't have to make it through Bitcoin Core process, which is hell, and no one has to change the filter apparatus, so it's just doing what it does. It's only invalidating blocks. It's not like stealing anyone's money or anything. Jeremy doesn't have to interact with BIP 300 at all. He just has to make sure that when he tests it, the right stuff goes through all the filters. So that is why it's that's kind of that's kind of like the new thing I've come up with. So we'll do that, and then if that still doesn't work, then I don't know. I guess we'll probably that I think that would just show that the culture in Bitcoin is like literally suicidal and is probably trapped in like a complete
I
death
see.
spiral, which is would really be something. But we already know how to fix that also, which is to just release a hard it'll be like a demo, but it will be a demo that has the looming threat of taking over if Bitcoin is really determined not to like like what is the actual plan? Like all the lightning people have quit. We darknet markets moving to Monero. Bitcoin has done very well, but we can't, you know, we gotten to where we are
No, we're
with
getting
the
off track. I
expectation
need
that,
to no. Okay, so let's just focus a little bit on this filtering thing.
yeah,
But you see, like you're saying stuff, and I'm getting explosions in my brain, the good sort. Okay, once we've gone through all the filters, what is at the end?
this is a block that is accepted by the network of miners.
Okay, so
Only the
basically
miners must
then
run. The miners must enforce a soft fork. I don't
okay,
know. People disagree with that, but I disagree with them back.
so the block that makes it through all the different filters gets appended to the blockchain.
Yeah, and the idea is if 51% is running the same configuration of filters, then no other block will, maybe you get one or two orphan blocks, which something that happens naturally anyway.
Yes.
So you really, the only blockchain that anyone will see
Yes.
is a blockchain that enforces all of these rules.
Yes.
Now you don't need to run. You could run Bitcoin Core 26
Got it.
forever, or you could run, as people did, as you probably remember, that Mircea Popescu character.
Yes.
They would run the very old Bitcoin 5, 0.5.3 or something. And they would just run that, and they ignored the new versions. And they had some pretty good reasons for doing that, even though they were crazy people, of course. But, rightly, people said, the more the code changes, the more, what do we have to do? Are we obligated to continue to look into each change? Because when you upgrade the software, this is like a consensual, you don't really know that there could be something in there where it's like a soft fork for like 5 years, and then it triggers something, this could be something hidden in the code. So we kind of want to discourage the code from changing. Right. So actually this filters thing is better. It's kind of like layers, like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3.
Got it. I got that. Okay. Okay. So now that's for the verification side. Now, okay, we're going to have a side which is also the block side, right? Oh, I suppose. Yeah, no. Even the miner would run exactly the same software. So once the miner discovers
the filters, because they must construct the mempool. They need the mempool to only have valid transactions that will pass all the filters. So when they want to fee optimize, they cannot include something that pays a high fee but that is invalid. So if all the miners do this, then the network just upgrades, even if individual people are running only a subset of the filters. If they only have some filters but not others, it doesn't matter. So
good God, man, have you broken the hegemony, the Bitcoin core hegemony?
We'll see. I don't know. I mean, it's lots. It's a lot. It's much more irrational, and I think that this is I think it may have discovered like a profound truth about like how everything regresses into a cult unless it has constant like external feedback, like challenge from the external world, without like constant dynamism and creativity and like interacting with so like each business doesn't have this problem, because business, they could lose a sale every day, so they're worried every single day you walk in and you're either going to buy Crest versus Colgate toothpaste, and they have constant feedback. And this is, I think, why so many people prefer the free market to other things.
Well, I mean, they are competing against other businesses, other toothpaste companies, right? So
exactly, yes. And the CVS is competing against the Walgreens and even supermarkets. So the supermarkets compete in stuff like a Walmart. There's already an enormous amount of competition just to get on the shelf at Walmart. Walmart will argue on people's behalf, and of course, Walmart will do all the like the safety testing for like children and stuff, because they know that it will come back and hit their brand.
Yes.
So the sheer scale of competition just to make it onto Amazon is on, like, I think the average person can't even really even imagine it. It's immense.
Yes.
And that's a good thing for us as consumers. We love that. And so that's great. And I think if you don't live in a world where that happens, I think stuff configures around like into like a weird political cult, academic in the worst sense of, not in the sense of like a professor looking into like prime numbers for like 40 years and then cracking something one day.
It's called fappery.
In the sense of just like blah, 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 like what is happening here. And so, yeah, I think that this is part of human nature, unfortunately. We have to, but as you see that the cult evolves and becomes more fragile. It also then becomes more evolved, and it becomes tighter, and it becomes like The cult
Incestuous.
becomes more efficient, but then it also becomes more. Sorry, what was the word you used?
Incestuous.
Yes, it's very like these cults. They must be self-referential. So this is also happens with like woke and like this other stuff, like
Right. They eat their
these
own.
weird these weird academic theories. They all just like they just cite each other in a big circle, and it never connects with outside reality, which is exactly what I'm saying. It's like, and then but this is another perfect example where when it does, it's like this. You have stuff that's good at error correction, but it's like making a lot of errors. So it's getting feedback and it's changing its configuration around a lot. And then you have stuff that is bad at error correction. It ignores the errors. It looks more stable, very superficially, but then it has like some kind of like explode black swan thing. So like we saw that earlier in America. You must have seen about this, like these university presidents, including the president of MIT, which you would really think like
Utterly,
MIT would be STEM
utterly
and would.
unbelievable.
You see, this is
Unbelievable.
the thing. When you don't have an internal error correction,
Yeah.
eventually you collide with the outside world. And this is also has happened in Bitcoin, kind of with the ordinals thing, where
Right.
ordinals was just like a version of like counterparty or something that we would have just kind of like we would not have made a big deal about. We kind of
No.
just would have tolerated it or would have been like kind of shrug or whatever. But because this, you can just see how different it is, like 2014, 2015 versus today, where it becomes this thing and it becomes even a scapegoat for the fees. Like no one even cares. No one, very few people even look up the extent to which the ordinals are related to the fees. But that doesn't even matter because the point is this: you get this huge reaction, and then you have like so you see it's people dancing in wizard costumes. That's considered. We can't have that kind of, do these people realize what the Bitcoin community was like? Like it was full of the craziest people you could ever find. Like having a weird outfit was like nothing.
Yeah.
And these people are all crazy. And we can't afford, people would say like we can't afford to have Udi and Eric up there because
Oh, fuck off.
think of how it'll make
Let
Bitcoin
them
look
be.
bad. It will make Bitcoin look unserious, and this is gonna like all of our children will grow up in a dystopia because you're just like, oh my gosh, like it's right. I had no idea it was so fragile. But it's not Bitcoin that's fragile, it's the cult. The cult evolves and it becomes more insular, and then it becomes when it collides with reality, the collision is. So if you're right that I will with the filter thing, the sideways layers if you're right about that, then it would probably be like a really crazy moment. It'll be like this huge, it'll be really something. Because just think about it. It's similar to the MIT thing where imagine telling this story to random lay people on the street. Some guy who works a 9 to 5 job and they have to drive they work a sales job or they're a roofer or something, and they're like, you have no idea, how bad it is that now people can run whatever software they want to run, and they don't have to go through they don't have to go through a 5-year Bitcoin core review rebase and go and personally go to every single person on Twitter, including every bot, and get that. Like, I don't know, like a
They
regular person would be
consent.
like, what? They'd be like, do you have any real problems in your life? Or is it all just like this internet BS? I have to go.
But it goes further than that. For example, if you were to try to get like 95% of the vote for something, you're not going to get that because
Yes, this was a big mistake of the process. But continue, please.
well, wouldn't I mean? I think where did I hear this before? It goes something along the lines of like for example, the 5% that are left over, they're more incentivized
Yeah,
to
they can now
how,
make
how
a
did
they can
you're
extract.
familiar with it? Tell me about it.
Yes,
How did it work?
there's okay. What happened in Bitcoin's history was that we used to have this 95% hash rate limit threshold. And
Yeah.
what had happened, a defining moment in Bitcoin's history was that we had the scaling conferences in 2015, and then scaling 3 was like kind of a long ways later, and it was deeply unsatisfying to one particular miner who left. And I don't remember which one, but they had 9% and they signaled for Bitcoin Unlimited. And maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say the wrong person because it was a dramatic moment, but anyone can look it up. It's pretty easy to find. So they went back and they left scaling 3 and they started signaling with 9% against, and SegWit as a soft fork, the code, it wasn't finished until the hackathon after scaling 3. And we had previously, to just try to give people a picture of what had happened. The old soft forks used to be activated by 90% threshold signal, but no one had ever intended this as a governance mechanism, really. And that's because you didn't need a governance mechanism, because everyone agreed with everything. Everyone wanted Bitcoin to succeed, and no one would have complained about whatever, like having there's the soft forks of the past were very simple, and they were like you must have the block height in the Coinbase transaction or something. There was no controversy until the block size war, and then even then the controversy was not about SegWit itself, because SegWit, as it was coded, it actually was a compromised block size increase, and it increased block size to 4 megabytes, or created this block weight thing. So even that was not controversial. What happened instead was that there was controversy over what to do. Like, there was the block size war. And then these 9 people decided to give it a thumbs down when they left. They decided to just say, we don't like the process. Now, I would love to know if anyone could interview them in a way that guarantees they tell the truth or something. I've always thought that they just meant that as a kind of like an angry lashing out. And I thought that they never really, I think it's possible they didn't even realize that when they did that it would block SegWit. But I'm not sure. Maybe they realized the whole time and they said, it doesn't really make any sense, because what we're talking about now is, why is the 95% threshold bad? And it only worked in a time when there was no controversy, and it was really very much a courtesy, where they said, we don't want any miners to accidentally lose money, because the miners are our friends. Everyone, happy friendship, hearts and rainbows were everywhere. So it was like, but every single person knew that 100% threshold, well, that's a terrible idea, because you have someone just troll the process, and then we have no real way to get rid of that person. But people did not generalize. They failed to generalize that logic all the way up to 49.9%, which is what they probably should have done. But no one really realized how bad things had gotten, I think. Scaling 3 was like, just kind of, people are at wit's end. And the precedent had already been set, and you know how precedents are. So this was how it had been done, with a bunch of really funny exceptions they would only underscore how much the precedent, people would prefer the precedent, because there's wacky situations where, like, it was supposed to, this is a funny one. A particularly funny instance was when one soft fork was supposed to activate by a certain date, but not enough miners had upgraded by that date, so they just pushed the date back. And it was like, it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog, or maybe vice versa, depending on how you look at it. But anyway, the point is, we needed 95, and there's no way to get to 95, because people were running a completely different client. They ran the Peter Risen large block Bitcoin Unlimited client, which did not behave differently, but it certainly wasn't going to signal for SegWit, because they're just, I don't know. Now, what that does is, it means when you have a threshold that is not 50%, it creates a strategic problem of this sort of limbo, where no one is getting what they want. So when it's 51%, you have closure, you have a clear outcome, and some people got what they want, others did not, but you at least tried something, and you know what to do again. And in particular, so a useful experiment might be to imagine what would have happened had the threshold been 51% back in the day for this event. This is one of the most important events in Bitcoin's history, because one of the many things it did is it escalated the hate of the large and small blockers into different levels, and it put the miners on the large blocker team eventually, and the small blockers devs, and then there was this miner developer hatred and mistrust that persists to this very day, and which is what created all this soft fork drama, which is de facto irrational, which you can basically prove that it is, because you can see how people's opinion flip-flops on something like CTV 119, where they hate it at one point, they love it, now they hate it again, and then it's like the whole none of it has anything to do with, none of it is guided by any kind of rational process. Or even most of the people who campaign for or against SegWit or Taproot clearly had no idea what it was. So many of the pro SegWit people didn't realize it was a block size increase for years after, and still years after, people think that it makes transactions more efficient or something. None of that's true. The Taproot people, they don't know what they thought it was a smart contract upgrade. You could, from what recorded comments that people made on stage on Bitcoin conferences, you could see that they had no idea what it was doing. So the whole process has basically reached a Kafkaesque proportion. But we can nonetheless say, what would have been different if it was 51%? Well, 9% would not have been enough to block SegWit. So it would have just gone through. There would have been an angry miner, but that would have been no different than the situation when already had some angry miners, some angry people, some happy people. So nothing would have happened. And you might say, well, Paul, you're just kind of dodging the question there, because you're evading the issue. Because what if the dissenting miner had enough? What if they had 52%? But my claim is that even if they had 52%, what would have happened would have been by far superior to what actually did happen in our reality, which I think is one of the worst things that could have happened. But so what would have happened was either one of two things. Either, on one hand, they would have said, we're blocking, they would, this one, see, when you're 9%, you're blocking SegWit, but you don't take full responsibility because you're only 9%. But if you block with 52%, you are taking responsibility. You say, I have 52%. This is my mining network, and I'm not activating SegWit. Now, then you deal with, since you are taking responsibility, you can be criticized, and people can do things to you. Like they can, if you're a mining pool and you don't personally own all this hardware, they could point their hardware somewhere else, or they could go on Twitter and criticize you, or they could mount a campaign to persuade you to change what you're doing. They could say, this person changed. And now, since you're 52%, you understand that it's now rational for you to pay attention when people make like a video and they say, here's why such and such should change what they're doing. And here's why it's in their interest. Because you say, I really am the one making the decision. So whether they get their way or not, it's either they get their way and then people criticize them, which is exactly how it should be. And they either ignore the criticism or reply to it. They change what they're doing. They learn, and they either think, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Should I change my mind? Now, or another thing that could happen would be that the people pushing for SegWit could say, they could also learn something. They could say, well, we really thought that this was a slam dunk, and this is going to increase the block size, also, in addition to helping Lightning work. And yet, an entire 52% is against us. And so they're like, wow, we really misjudged how seriously people are taking this problem. They're really, really upset about this. And then they think, what could we do something differently, or what should we do instead? So all this is far superior to this 9%, 95% situation, which has the toxic limbo, because the 9% person can say, I'm not getting what I want, which is clearly they wanted some kind of different scaling roadmap. So I'm not getting what I want. So you're not getting what you want either, but no one takes responsibility for this. The 9% person, they have a very limited incentive to even listen to anything that anyone is saying at this point, because I'll get to that in a second, which is that the people who want to get up to 95%, they have a very limited incentive to reach out to the 9% person and give them a concession, because they give that person a concession. Then what if some next guy, he's got 12% hash rate, but right now they were cooperating. They were in the 95 group, but they weren't getting any special, attention or any kind of special consideration or concession. So they might think, well, wait a minute, I want something too. And then so you're playing whack-a-mole with 9%, 12%. All these people can pop up. And as long as they've got more than 5%, they can veto. And this veto makes it very hard to get anything done. And it also makes it impossible to know to whom you should reach out to change the problem. Whereas if they have 52%, no one has that problem. It's crystal clear exactly who to reach out to and what to do and what they want to know. And so the whole process can continue to evolve and have a healthier growth of knowledge and growth of persuasive knowledge and stuff. But now, not only is because of this fact, as if it weren't bad enough, the 9% person, they think they're going to be thinking now, I've opened this can of worms, I've opened Pandora's box. Anyone can now block with more than, if you have 6% or more, you can block. So now we're in a situation where nothing is going to happen. So they don't even have any incentive to really listen to anyone or participate in anything. They can just throw this temper tantrum. And then so this is why that.
You mentioned that, but I think wouldn't it go further in the saying, well, they could start to say, well, if you give me something, that I might change my mind.
Yeah,
and
exactly,
then,
right.
And then
it's a Coasian like extraction,
right?
Which is each of the every 6% is going to want 100, like 99% of the benefit,
right?
And so you see it doesn't work.
And then more people will be like, well, George over there is starting to get some good benefits. I mean, what happens if I also start to,
exactly, yes,
switch over? So okay, so it becomes difficult.
So if
in
it's
that
more
scenario.
than 51%, it won't. It just mathematically, game theoretically will not work. But people don't like that because they think, oh, the poor 49%, whatever. It's like, that's not the point. They don't. Right. That's not the point. The 49% are going to have to get their rights some other way if they're relying on a pure democracy for that. But that's not how people use this type of thing. People don't say 51% of the hash rate can just rewrite the ledger and do whatever they want. It's always this very narrow thing when there's a dispute between different options, and you have to disqualify all of them except for one.
Yes.
And that is where you must do 51%, or it will just be, you will never get anywhere. So that's
so I'd like to bring the conversation back into this this filter mechanism, this process of because I was running through my mind a little bit on how to design such a piece of software. Hear me out for a second. One needs to be careful. I would go as far as to say that the language that is used to implement the rules, the rule checking, it should be a completely deterministic language. The reason is because you want to avoid non-determinism. So, for example, if you have a very expressive language, that language might be able to, whoever writes a rule or is maybe not such a good programmer or something like that, you can actually force the filtration mechanism to actually allow stuff through which shouldn't go through, or stuff that which should go through but actually doesn't. So it's important that one would have to implement the rules in a specific deterministic language. That would be one thing I'd also be looking at. Actually, it's a really interesting piece of software because there's a lot of potential that can be weaved into that. You see, I recall my first Indaba I had with you. You mentioned you solved the problem of oracles. It's also a point where you can actually weave oracles into this. Am I correct in that?
The oracle thing must be on its own side chain, because my design, and I may not have solved it. We'll have to see if I actually have or not, but I think I have gotten it as theoretically close as it can possibly get in practice. But I think but yeah, that thing, that's its own very complicated matter. But I think that we have my project Bitcoin Hive Mind, which was originally called Truthcoin, before there were altcoins, before there was like a coin name for everything. But that I think that will be its own sidechain. So that will be the BIP 300 rules will support the 256 sidechains, and then I think that will be, because that requires a little bit of it requires a lot of control over like state and like people's participate. People have to like
Right.
basically stake coins. It's not exactly how it works, but that's how
Okay,
people are
okay.
trying
So
to
it'll be on a
make
slide
money.
chain. Okay, so no,
Yeah.
what I'm doing is I'm fleshing out this idea a little bit more. There's another thing that could be that I find very interesting. So there's a something that scares me about this is, for example, is Noster in China? No. The reason why it's not in China is because even though the Noster communities say that
Mhm.
Nostr is a state, it's robust against the state. Actually, it's not, and the reason is because relayers are behind an IP address. And if you want to see your internet go down very very quickly, you have a war, and very very quickly those nodes, your IP address, if you're a suspect,
Mhm.
your IP address goes down very quickly. So the problem I have is, how does one create, because I don't think Bitcoin is robust against the state at all, and the reason is because we use IP everywhere. Um, for Bitcoin to become robust against the state, you need to be able to disseminate blocks not by IP. I mean, you can use IP because it's
Mhm.
very efficient and the network is already there. And currently we're in a peacetime, so it's good and instant efficient. But there needs to be a backup strategy, and the backup strategy
Mhm.
is disseminating blocks not by IP. So here we are. We've got this little piece of software that's also doing filtration stuff. And if you design it correctly, this thing can become the mechanism for distributing or disseminating blocks other than IP. This is one of the major
Yeah, I
problems that I am
think.
solving, and I see that little
Oh,
entry
really?
point
That's
there.
great. I mean,
Yeah,
you may know this. It's kind of obscure, but it's fascinating. Like the older versions of Bitcoin, this has since been removed, which is probably a mistake. But they would like there's like the seed nodes that are like whatever, like they may be even DNS resolved as far as I
they
know, but I
are
think the
DNS
IP,
resolved, and
you
Luke
know,
Dash
so
Jr. is one of them.
right, he is one of them. And so it's like this is like a famous list of like super cool but it's like if the software cannot use the seeds, it has like multiple backup. It used to have multiple backup strategies, including that the network would like connect to like random IRC channels that were like
That
Bitcoin
was the
plus like
early
different
days. Yeah,
numbers.
correct.
Yeah,
So
and
like
I
like
find this
this.
fascinating.
No,
So
no,
yeah.
this is good. This is good engineering. I mean, from that perspective, because IRC is actually very distributed protocol, and it's a way of disseminating a separate protocol date disseminating information. You could download the blocks from IRC from that mechanism. The people who are running Bitcoin now are not. They don't seem to have the state as a threat model anymore, and
Yeah, there
or
should
else they've
certainly be
become so
war games.
complacent.
Yeah, there should be a war games thing where we do like little simulations where we say,
Yeah,
okay, this
war
is day
games cost
one,
money.
the
Yeah,
whatever we've
yeah,
completely lost all
yeah,
DNS. We've lost. We'll just see like what what will happen. That would
yeah,
be
yeah.
something that I think we should do. I mean, I think we should have war gamed the Canadian truckers thing. Was like kind of a big eye opener for me where I was like, oh no, the project is actually dying because that that should have been like because what actually let me refresh people's memory of what happened. We had widespread COVID lockdowns, which differed enormously in terms of like we have different, there's different countries that have different tolerance for, and some countries are more urban than others. And so it's like it's very different. Like Tokyo is very different than a huge city where people are cramped together. New York City and Tokyo are different than whatever Huntsville, Alabama. I don't know. So, and Florida is different also. Florida gets more sunlight, has more beaches. You can go, people are outside in the fresh air. So we had many different countries and we had many different policies. But what some people decided to do in the democracy of Canada was protest. Um, they had a very peaceful protest. And what the government decided to do was try to track down everyone who was protesting and freeze all their bank accounts and like basically depriving them, exiling them from economic life in Canada, and probably basically forcing them to do whatever they want. Like very much holding a gun to their head. Like you can't get food, you can't. What are you going to do? So then the Bitcoin community tried to like onboard these people and send them money. And this amounted to basically like at some point people had gotten like paper wallets. And fast forward, nothing useful happened, and the Canadian government confiscated all of the. It was a confused mess. No one really knew where the money was going or who had it, and the Canadian government ended up confiscating most of the money, most of the Bitcoin. So then I was like, oh man, this is like directly in our wheelhouse, you know? This is like as good as it gets. And we gave money to the anti-protest, the government of Canada. And I was like, well, this is terrible. Like, so that was when I was like, okay, too many people are neglecting the UX. It is like VC parasites or whatever. So So that was when that was kind of a wake-up call for me. So, and I didn't understand when they removed that stuff about the IRC, or maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm very confident that I remember that they removed a lot of that interesting stuff about how to bootstrap the network and find peers and stuff. And I was kind of like, why? Because it's like almost never triggered. You know what I mean? It's like you have like a backup pacemaker. And it's like, oh, we'll just remove the battery from that. And it's like, well, wait a minute, like, why don't we just leave it the way it is? And so there's people, the pro-ossification people are so, no offense to them, but they are just so dumb. They don't know what they're doing, because even though they're right, that they don't even know what they're talking about, because it's like, it's a shame. We live in a situation where so many people are either correct or incorrect for the wrong reason, and they don't. So the code is being changed. Like, what I'm trying to say is this. A lot of people are against soft forks because they don't want to change the protocol.
Oh, sorry. Just press pause. Just press pause. Have you seen how many changes are going into Bitcoin Core at the moment?
Well, this is exactly what I'm getting at, is that we've had no soft forks. Okay. We used to have 2 soft forks every 6 months, and they used to be non-controversial. And the soft forks we have today, they are enormously powerful. They unlock all kinds of cool stuff. With U3XO, if there was a soft fork for that, you could have a full node on a mobile phone. But we don't want to do this. We don't want to touch the soft fork because of this, because it maybe someone would have to ask the miners to do something, and that we should all just kill ourselves instead of doing that. So we don't want to touch that, but instead, all kinds of other stuff is fair game. You know, Matt Corral accidentally, I don't blame him, but he accidentally introduced an inflation bug trying to shave off a couple milliseconds of time. So you have that. You have stuff can just be torn out and refactored, and no one is really going to look and see what is. And then you have people like Luke Dash Jr. who say that you are impelled. You must always run the latest version of Bitcoin Core. So now you're obligated to, like, I don't know, almost just about like one out of all the 8 billion people on Earth, there's only a few who can really run a node according to these bizarre criteria and actually have any idea of what it's doing. And so and then you have all these people who just refactor. They want to be a Bitcoin Core developer, so they'll refactor. Lines of code are moved. No one is going to really review that very carefully. I mean, they will look, but it's possible that you could sneak something by, because you don't get a lot of kudos for reviewing a refactor. You know, I mean, you get some, I'm sure, but
so they like to bike shed. They will bike shed
lots of lines of code around, but not actually doing anything. So people, the soft fork is great because they're usually small number of line of code, and they're great. And that's the one that people don't like, because they can get attention on Twitter for being. No one is going to get attention for fighting against a frivolous refactor where someone sneaks in a keylogger or some kind of other kind of like horrendous thing, or even, you know, just removing these things. So I'm fascinated by this whole bootstrap, this whole how the network would work on something other than IP. I think that's absolutely fascinating. And there should be, of course, it should have, like, we should be adding as many backup things that we think will never. That list should be like 150 things long.
Correct.
You should be able to like load a USB stick in there and download
sneaking it. Exactly. That should be. We should be working towards this. And I agree. Oh, anyway. So, oh gosh. Okay. So we nailed a couple of those points. One of the points was what was the do's and don'ts one should adhere to? What were
For
the lessons
Bitcoin Cash,
learned?
we didn't really do
We
those,
didn't really
of
go
which
into
there are
that.
many.
So
I had a table that I tweet sometimes. I feel bad tweeting it because I think it's so accurate. It must be very demoralizing for the poor people who have, but we're all adults here. But no one would have. They made a ton of money. We're all responsible for our decisions. So, but Bitcoin Cash, the numerous flaws. One is the whole circumstances of the timing of the launch. This what they call splitting the vote. So Bitcoin Cash was launched by Omri Sachet so Segwit 2x was like May or something of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so Segwit 2x it's already a terrible plan. Segwit 2x was basically Segwit will activate on August 1st, and 3 months later, 3 months later, there will be a 2x hard fork block size increase. So, like many compromises, everyone was unhappy by it. But what happened was, so this, first of all, I'd just like to take a moment to say that this plan is already terrible because it's basically a hostage swap where one side gives up the hostages first, and then 3 months later they expect to get their hostages back. Why would they do that? But it's also terrible because one can happen at any time, Segwit activation, but the other requires everyone to coordinate on a date. So that one should have been first, just as a matter of organizational principle. But no one really wanted to do it. There was no momentum for a hard fork anyway, because Segwit was already going to increase the block size by more than a factor of 2 anyway. So this whole thing was absurd from the beginning, unfortunately, but that's where it was. Now, while this is the plan that the large blockers have bought into. While this plan is going, and in fact, at the moment where it would have the highest goodwill, which is when Segwit activated on August 1st, and it did not activate because of the UASF, although the UASF was waiting. Miners folded right before and activated it the normal way, and it just happened to activate around August 1st. It's kind of a weird coincidence. That's the day that Omri Sachet launched Bitcoin Cash, which is the worst day, I think, of all days ever, because again, everyone is thinking in the large blocker camp that Segwit 2x is the way to go. And I even clearly remember tweets where I think Jameson Lopp asked, so is now that Bitcoin Cash exists, is Segwit 2x off? Perfectly reasonable question, because we all understand network effects, I thought, but apparently not. And then someone like Eric Voorhees replied, and Eric Voorhees is a very smart guy. He replied and he said, of course not. Bitcoin Cash is some other thing. Segwit 2x is still on, or whatever. This is what I mean by splitting the vote. So then later, Segwit 2x, the timing is extra worse, because at the exact moment, Segwit 2x is totally humiliated when they abandon it, because it's a terrible plan. Because as I've already said, you've already given your hostages away. So of course they were going to say, well, we're not giving you 2x hard fork now for nothing. Like that's just too much. You're just giving too much. It's just unreasonable. Like the plan was terrible. So this is the exact moment that this was sort of humiliated. Large blocker group was humiliated. Then Roger just kind of has some kind of tweet where he says, okay, this thing that has been around for months that Eric said is not the official thing. That's now like Bitcoin.com will be supporting Bitcoin Cash. And then they got into a big fight over the ticker. They said, we want the BTC ticker. We are the real Bitcoin. We want the Bitcoin name. Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. So this is another issue, is the name was always not great. So the small blockers had the opportunity to obtain like the Bcash social media accounts, like bcash.com and whatever. Then they tried to get the name Bcash, but implicit, that was itself kind of a little bit of a dirty move, but fair game, I suppose, but kind of still dirty. But it underlies a kind of deep truth, which is that Bcash was actually a better name than Bitcoin Cash, because people prefer words to mean the same thing on Tuesday that they meant on Monday. And they already have, the Bitcoin word is already locked into something. So people are then like Bitcoin Cash, you have to wonder, am I being misunderstood when you talk about it? So the name was tough, and fighting for it after the fact was that not good. And then when you lose, then you are humiliated again. So I don't know. That's another one of the problems. So the timing was horrendous. Fighting over the name was not good. A bigger problem, though, even than that, is that Bitcoin Cash did not actually solve the problem either of block size or of governance, which is exactly what the block size war was about. In contrast to where BIP 300 actually does, because everyone knew that 1 megabyte versus 8 megabytes was what they wanted. I think eight is not really 8 is not enough to scale to the entire globe. It's only 8 times bigger than 1. So it's like are we just gonna wait till that one fills up and then do it again? And then are we just gonna keep doing this over and over again? This is gonna be a big process. And so even for anyone who thought that the block size should be something else, no one could clearly articulate like what that was or why it should be now that it moved to 8, and then what the schedule should be. So even there were some people, I think BIP 101, it was called, a bit that I think Peter Wiles co-author on or something, that had like the block size increase to 2 and then grow by like 11% a year or something. So that would at least purport to solve the problem of block size and of governance, which is to say this is what it is permanently. But instead, everyone, it's kind of baffling because the idea does not actually represent, it can't represent, it just kicks the can down the road. And so all the reasons for ignoring let me put it this way, like there will be a new time when people disagree over the block size, even if it was 8 megabytes. Some will say 8 is, we've come far enough, but now no further. And then some people will say we want to. So will we split again? And then will we just split again and again and again and again? And so I think everyone kind of had this intuitive understanding that this didn't really even make any sense. And so that it was like, what is the actual alternative? In politics, you can't beat something with nothing. So it didn't actually solve the problem at all. It just kicks the can down the road and moves the problem over a little bit. Need some kind of final solution. There's another problem with Bitcoin Cash, is that the idea of large one blockism is not good. It's probably better with hindsight. It's probably better than going all in on Lightning. But you see, this is the thing, is Bitcoin, it's only an illusion that Bitcoin BTC has gone all in on Lightning. It's a very convincing illusion, and it has the danger of becoming reality. But you see, it's really not, because you're still a way out. There's other ways out, ARC, Covenants, BIP 300, etc. So we can kind of see with hindsight that the Lightning idea looks a lot worse. However, the large block on L1 idea still has the same problem that it's always had, which is that you can put a large block, you can put a more expensive layer on top of a cheap L1. You can do small L1, large L2, but you really can't do the reverse because they're mandatory in one direction. So it's like saying you must join this rich country club, and then you can optionally, for an extra $5, the country club membership is like $12,000 a month or something, but for an extra $5 you can get a candy cane or something. It's like, but that doesn't make sense. But the reverse makes a lot of sense, where everyone has to pay $5, and then a couple people, if they want, can pay $12,000 a month and go golfing or whatever. So that's yet another problem. I made a really long list at one point. Just some details. So like the replay protection was a mistake. They should have done full transaction replay. Instead, they did full transaction replay protection. The replay protection, I don't know. It's a misnomer, because who's being protected from what? Nothing, as far as I know. The replay protection is just a concession to the pre-existing chain that you will stigmatize yourself by forcing you to become a different chain. So I don't know. No one is being protected in that scenario. The end user can always broadcast on only one network or the other. um, using very innumerable wallet tricks or other kinds of things that make it opt in. So that's another mistake. They kind of got into a quagmire where one huge issue was that this is part of what I mean about them not solving the problem of governance, is that and solving the problem of block size. They go from 1 to 8, but then they quickly get outflanked by Bitcoin SV, which just goes to whatever, infinite. So now they're stuck in a position where they have to say, well,
We fucked up.
yeah, they have to say something like, the problem with Bitcoin SV is the blocks are too large. And now it's like, oh no, like now what? Now it's very, so it's unfortunate, but I think that but it's intriguing that despite all of that, after in November, Roger announced his support for Bitcoin Cash, it did make it to number 2 for a day. It flipped into Ethereum. You remember that tweet and the congrats on this seriously. So it was the most successful altcoin, sort of, despite all these numerous flaws. But I think it failed so badly that it unfortunately discredited the hard fork institution. There was one or two more things. It's kind of minor, but they were relevant, I think, which were that well, first of all, they spent too much time talking. Greg Maxwell would show up and start talking to them on r/BTC, which I don't know why they allowed themselves to just be distracted by that. But then one thing was that Omri wanted some money for development, which is kind of reasonable, and then he wanted to put in this tax, and then people wanted to say, is that voluntarism or not? And they got into a big fight over that. This is the point: is you live by the fork, die by the fork. You split off, then you have to worry about other people splitting off again, which is exactly what happened. And so I think they did just about everything wrong. I think it's baffling the split the vote thing is the most important thing. You need everyone to understand why they're joining the coalition and why, and you need sovereignty over your name. You don't want to be fighting over the name. The name is just too important and it's intangible. So that's some of my list. I have a piece of writing somewhere. I'm sure I forgot things. I mean, but there's a lot of that is more than enough to keep people busy.
Keep them chugging along. Were there any other? Remember, you said, "Oh, we." Well, I was thinking we could stick a peg in the ground on that particular point of the conversation whereby you said there's so many more things we could discuss.
Threads, yeah.
Do you remember?
No, but I thought of another one, which is, of course, that if another problem with Bitcoin Cash is that the idea of they had no individual sovereignty over the idea. So let's say large blocks are the best idea in the world. You try it out, it works great. How are you going to stop BTC from just now hard forking? Like, sure, a lot of the existing people would be fired or discredited, but all it takes is one person in the BTC community who doesn't want to lose their money to Bitcoin Cash to just say, take a leadership role, release large block hard fork at a later date. So what's so special about August 1st, 2017? So all this stuff was very difficult. They made their job almost impossible to succeed. But despite that, they made it too. But yeah, I don't know. See the threads, we managed to talk about something about next steps. So yeah, I think maybe the only I still have a last stone to unearth. I mean, really two, because I have to release a good testnet network so that everyone can see. Even normal people can just experience for themselves like what BIP 300 would do if it were brought to Bitcoin. But I'm already doing that, but I have to do a better job of that. We're improving it as we speak, and then have to do this thing that miners could run that is very respectful. I mean, people will. I imagine the critics who you and I would agree we should just ignore at this point, these type of critics, but they will say that this is skirting around the Bitcoin core process, but it's really actually respecting the process by not saying we won't. They have made it very clear, both in person and in other communications, that they get very uncomfortable dealing with soft forks, even ones that they personally think are necessary. So another example of this is that everyone should at least hear about is BIP 118, any priv out, say cash no input. That's in the Lightning white paper. That's necessary for L2 for it would improve Lightning by preventing this state of, I mean, Lightning's kind of unfixable, but Lightning currently has this endlessly growing thing in RAM of all the states that you have to react to, like old Western style. But they will do away with that. It's already been coded by reputable people, and it has been active on Signet for a while. So it's jumped all the normal hoops, and yet no one wants to touch activation. So it's not BIP300, it's not me, it's not drive chain. It's just that the process has faltered as a kind of collateral damage from the scaling war. The process is defective, and they don't want to participate. And you can see why, because look, Jeremy participated and I participated. We get all kinds of like harassment and abuse, all of which is totally unfair. And but I mean, I'm not complaining about that, but I'm just stating a pure fact that it's in Jeremy's case, it's obvious that everyone liked the idea, and then even when he proposed activating it, they all no one would ever criticize the idea. They would say, we just don't like it being activated this way. And now the talk of the town is how to activate 119. So that's the process. Is someone comes up with a good idea, and then he was so vilified that he quit not only Bitcoin development, but he basically quit Bitcoin over this. And now it's only sort of recently, it's like half return. So that's really the relationship people want to have with people come up with like great Bitcoin technology. Like now, as of now, his idea and mine are the only that could even theoretically allow ever more than a small percentage of the Earth's population to actually own Bitcoin in a sense of like a technical way of owning it, like non-custodially. So the whole thing's nonsensical, but yeah, it's really, they don't want to, the soft fork processes, they don't want to have anything to do with it. And they want to instead go back to just coming up with new address formats and cutting out the IRC chat, bootstrapping machine. So I don't know. I think that's just about everything I can remember.
Okay. Well, good. Okay. Do we have anything more to sort of cover? Shall we?
We covered a lot. This is going to be, I mean, I don't know if other people feel this way, but I don't know. Every Bitcoin podcast for the last years and years has been so predictable and boring. And this is like, I mean, I hope people get something out of this. You don't get something out of this, then I don't know. Again, you can go, hey, there's plenty of other stuff out there. You can always go to you could do like a fake bit where we like pretend to be like one of the it's been so long since I've seen many of the mainstream ones that I don't even know how to ridicule them, but many of them are just really something.
Yeah.
And
should we wrap it up
like,
then?
What's your price prediction for the next week or something? That's like, oh my god. Like,
should we wrap it up then?
I think probably we should. Yeah, we've gone for a
cool.
while.
All right, and then I'll stop recording. So